Today we're going to be answering one of the questions that's been floating around the community since the very inception of the game. Is it worth it to shoot down the enemy bot aircrafts as they bring in reinforcements? On the surface, this should be an easy yes, because when you shoot it down, all the enemies are supposed to die, and it's supposed to make it much easier for you to fight. However, as we know with the game, there's a lot of glitches and other things that happen, which means some people debate this and say that it's not worth it because of the glitches and other things that happen. So let's approach this with science. I spent hours shooting down reinforcement aircraft so you wouldn't have to, and I compiled the results together, so let's talk about it. When you shoot down the enemy aircraft, there are 4 possible outcomes. 1. Nothing happens. 2. It glitches out and the enemies get stuck mid-air or stuck on the ground and can't really do anything and become harmless. 3. It glitches out and the enemies get stuck under the aircraft and they can shoot out at you, but it is harder to shoot them because the aircraft deflects all the bullets. And number 4, they all die and it is a successful outcome. All the enemies get destroyed and you don't have to worry about them. This is what you want. So after shooting down hundreds of aircraft, here's what I can say happens most of the time in my experience. Now, of course, these results are a small sample size. A couple hundred is fairly notable, but considering how many millions of these aircrafts have probably been destroyed over the course of weeks, probably hundreds of millions, it's a relatively small sample size. So we're going to use it to try and discuss this, but no, more work does need to be done in this area to get a definitive answer. In my experience, 50 to 60% of the time when you blow up the enemy aircraft, you are going to experience a glitch. And out of these glitches, I would say 7 or 8 times out of 10, it's the good kind of glitch where the enemy gets stuck in the air and they're just free for you to take down without any threat, or their weapons get stuck firing up in the air, or they can't move. That is a beneficial glitch. However, the other percentage of the time, about 20% of the time, or 2 out of 10, they get stuck under the enemy aircraft and they become really hard to take down, but they can shoot out at you. Now, this isn't a big deal if they're just non-threatening regular enemies, but if you happen to get like Rocket Devastator stuck under there, they have a complete shield and can fire across the map at you with almost no repercussions, and this creates a very bad scenario where they're very hard to take out unless you waste another stratagem on them. I would say another 15 to 20, maybe even 30% of the time, we got outcome number 4, where the enemy is destroyed, or an alternative number 4, where the enemy is damaged. Now, this is unconfirmed, but it is my theory right now, based on my testing, that even if they aren't completely destroyed when the ship crashes, they still take damage. I get this theory because a few enemies were instantly taken down by a Gatling sentry that I had out that should not have been taken down by the Gatling sentry. Now, this could be because they were walking on rocks and they just got knocked off balance, which is an instant KO for the bots, or because their damage had already been met, they were taken down with just one more hit. It is worth noting on the instant takedown, I have never seen that work on the actual tank, not the Hulks, but the actual physical tanks. As far as I can tell, they never get glitched, and they never take damage from falling. No matter how high up you blow them out of the air, no matter what position, no matter how they land, I have not seen in all of my data a tank destroyed by being shot down. That leaves the remaining 10 to 20% of the time, nothing happens. You fire down, you take down the aircraft, and enemies just get flung out of it. They take no damage, they just get up and start shooting at you. This is the worst possible outcome, not just because the enemies live and now you have to take them down, not just because you fired off your stratagem weapon or however you took it down and now you have to reload or you're down a little bit of ammo, but you've also littered the battlefield with obstacles that the enemies can seem to shoot through, but you cannot. So you've given the bots an advantage and wasted your resources and gained nothing for it. So now that we have this data, what does it mean? Does that answer the question? Is it better to shoot them down or is it not? So let's pick apart the data and see what it says. Based on the numbers I've given you here, you have somewhere between a 60 and 80% chance of something happening when you shoot down the aircraft that is most likely beneficial to you, except for that 20% of the time where it's a bad glitch and it's a hindrance to you. I think those odds are pretty darn good. Yes, there's that 20% chance that they get stuck underneath the aircraft, but outside of that, a 60 to 80% chance for something good to happen, whether it be them getting stuck in air, whether it be getting instantly destroyed, whether it be they're glitched on the ground and then now they're a non-threat. that is almost too good of an opportunity to pass up. However, it is also worth noting these numbers are slightly influenced by the enemies that are carrying on the aircraft carrier. As I said previously, the tanks are absolutely immune to being blown out of the air as far as I can tell. What this means is it's never worth wasting the ammo on them, and rather you should be hitting them while you can, or taking them down the second they hit the ground. Unfortunately, Hulks also seem to be the most resilient to being glitched out. More times than not, they're the ones who absolutely survive the fall, which makes sense because they have more health, so if it is a damage-based system, well, they have more health, so the damage doesn't do as much to them. Most of the community also agrees that the Hulks, especially the flamethrower Hulks, are the biggest threats, so having a chance to absolutely remove them from the fight before they can do any damage or cause any problems is a wonderful alternative to have to actually fighting them straight up like you should. The enemies that seem to take the most damage or be most likely to be destroyed are the small chaff, which again makes sense. They have the least HP, so if they're getting damaged as they fall, the ones that have the least HP are the most likely to be destroyed in this process. That makes sense. So is it worth shooting down the enemy aircraft? I believe there are 4 factors to determine to answer this question. Number 1, can you hit the shot? It's not a particularly difficult shot, but if you're being fired at, if you're taking damage, if you're under stress, it can be easy to miss the shot if you're either inexperienced, in a rush, or you have an outstanding circumstance that you couldn't factor in, like a stray bullet hitting you at just the moment you went to fire off the attack. If you're using something like a quasar cannon, usually missing isn't like a huge resource dampener as in like you don't lose ammo. However, you still now don't have access to that weapon until it's off cooldown, which can be a huge disadvantage, especially if you're playing on Helldive, where multiple Hulks and tanks are being dropped in at once. If you're using a recoilless rifle, yes, you can reload, but that's going to take time, that's a waste of resources, and that reload does take time that you may not have. Number 2, what are the enemies being called in? If your team has no anti-chaff, like if for some reason everyone went commandos and rockets, then yeah, it makes sense to shoot down the chaff aircraft because you don't have a way to deal with those as easily, and they're more likely to be taken down by this process. That makes total sense. But if only one person brought a weapon that can shoot down the enemy aircraft, and they happen to be someone who misses, or it's a long reload and they're calling in multiple tanks and multiple problems to deal with, it might not make sense to waste that one shot on an aircraft when it can be used to put down Hulks or tanks that are already on the battlefield. Factor 3 also has to deal with resources, but do you have the resources to take down the enemy aircraft efficiently? For example, if you're carrying a recoilless rifle, you got 6 shots. And if you're halfway through the game, supplies are on cooldown, you're nowhere near a point of interest, and you only have 1 shot left or 2 shots left, it might not be worth the gamble of taking down the enemy aircraft when you could save that for actually taking down a Hulk or a tank as a threat, especially again if your team did not bring any anti-tank themselves. The final factor, I admit, sounds a little bit silly, but I do believe that is a valid point because many people have brought this point up. I want to factor it in, and that is, it looks cool to blow them up. And like, there's no denying that, right? It does look cool to absolutely destroy them, especially if like it's a night mission or a snowy mission. They crash down, you get that huge fireball explosion. It is super satisfying. Granted, it's disappointing when that does absolutely nothing, but it is still cool. And that rule of cool is very important to Helldivers too. In the same way, a lot of community videos, you see someone call in a 500 kg eagle and they jump into it, or they salute before they die, or a lot of different things the community does. The rule of cool plays an important factor in the game, and that is it's just more fun when you're doing cool things, when you have cool fireball explosions, and when you feel like a super soldier. So if you've watched this entire video and you say, yeah, the data may say this, but I'm not going to do it because it looks cool, that's a completely valid way to play. That is a completely valid way to look at this whole video and say, nah, I'm not going to use any of that math. I'm not going to use any of that data. I just want to look cool, which means I'm going to make the big things go boom. Completely valid. I respect that. As for my personal opinion, after doing this experiment, after taking down a bunch of enemy aircraft, after spending a few hours doing this, I do think I will continue to blow up the enemy aircraft as well. One, because it's cool like we just discussed, but also for me, the probability of something good happening seems to outweigh the few scenarios where something bad happens. And take it from me, I'm not the greatest shot in the world. You've probably seen this video a few times where I've whiffed it and completely missed. Even if you miss, to me, it's still worth the gamble because you're going to have that backup in your team on level 9 Helldive. Should be competent enough to make up for it if you happen to embarrass yourself and miss like I do. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for watching my video. There are plenty of other Helldiver videos on my channel, so if you're interested, go check them out. Thank you so much for watching and have a blessed day.